My name is Aakrit. I'm the co-founder and CEO of a company called Haptic. We're super excited to be here at the Voice Summit. Last 2 days have been a lot of fun. It's huge. It's a lot bigger than what we thought it would be, and it's just been fun hanging out with all of you. So we're going to go over. It's about 15 minutes, and then we'll try and leave some time for questions at the end. We're going to go over our experience building our first ever end-to-end voice application across Alexa mobile web, and just some things we learned, and hopefully some of that could be interesting to you guys. Great. So very quickly about us. This is obviously the shameless plug that I actually came here for. So what is Haptic? Haptic is a conversational AI company for the enterprise. We've been at it for a long time. We're a 5-year-old company. We have now implemented and deployed about 117 bots or applications of conversational AI across mobile, web, voice, messaging, third-party platforms. We touch about little north of 30 million devices on a monthly basis. And then we've processed about a little north of 1 billion interactions so far. The use cases we tend to focus on are all end customer interaction. So of course, things like service or support, but we also do some interesting use cases like lead generation, feedback, and then what we like to call as concierge between a business and their end customer. We pride ourselves on being a one-stop shop platform. So we do everything, including we have a bot builder, which is similar to other dialogue builders that you'll see around here. We have our own analytics. We have our own agent dashboard. We have our own AI trainer team that adds data, labels data. We have also about, I think, 300 plus templates built out for different conversational applications. We've built our own NLP, our own NLU. Basically, we've been doing it for a number of years, and we sort of put this package together in a way that anybody who wants to implement an entire conversational strategy, they don't need to go anywhere else except work with us. And we do about 10 different channels, including mobile, web, mobile app, mobile web both, Alexa, Google Home, Messenger, Twitter, and so on and so forth. Great. So as you can imagine, a large part of our initial years was spent in building text-based chatbots, because that was what was the first wave of kind of conversational AI. But over the last couple of years, we've matured and moved into building out voice applications. And we just finished this one implementation, which took some time, but we're very, very proud of it, which is essentially an omni-channel voice application for one of the leading QSRs globally. They're among the top 3 QSRs in the world. And essentially, we built out an end-to-end voice implementation for them for food ordering. So when we talk about end-to-end and omni-channel, this included not only an Alexa skill, but also an in-app voice implementation. So within their mobile app, being able to order using voice, as well as the same thing on their website, as well as the same thing on mobile web. So all of the common channels where they saw consumption and usage, essentially they wanted to build out kind of a voice-first interface. The interesting part was just thinking about the objectives before we actually went and did it. One, of course, was providing voice as an alternate interface for the ordering beyond just the standard graphical user interface. But also, it was one of the things that we were keeping in mind was to enhance the ordering experience for frequent and repeat users, right? Which is for the first-time user going through the standard flow versus a voice flow could be fairly similar, but for repeat and frequent users, we realized that voice could actually be significantly beneficial as an experience. I'll not be able to obviously share specifics of the implementation until the whole thing is live, but I'll really cut to kind of some of our really key learnings that we had. Some of these things may have already been touched upon at some point or the other in the last couple of days, but for us, especially coming from a text-first world and then moving to kind of voice as an interface, was a massive learning curve and a shift where we almost had to reorient ourselves in the way we thought about conversational applications. And for us, really there were three major learnings, and I'll walk into all of these specifically. First one being that voice applications, and I'm very happy to see many companies now focusing on this, but voice applications are all about design, right? The VUI, or the voice user interface, is really what defines how good a voice application is going to be. We don't even think it as much comes down to the quality of tech or NLU or NLP. All of that is good, and that's almost like the starting point of where you want to be. But the success really depends upon how well we're able to design the dialogue between the user and the bot. The second is that we talk about this often, but try to be great at one thing, and then I'll elaborate on this in a minute. And then the third is sort of voice only plus voice plus text as a hybrid interface. What are the differences and how we saw some of these things work as well. So coming to the design, right? And I sort of break it up into 3 or 4 different areas. And the first one is emotion, right? So essentially, it's really easy when you're building a standard application to basically say, please provide your location. But when it comes to a voice application, the emotion will really dictate the success of whether the user responds back to it or not. So I'll give you a couple of examples. So that in all of these cases, the red is where the conversion was really poor, and the green is where the conversion was really good. And whenever I talk about conversion, I mean the percentage of people actually responding back to something, right? So if the bot went saying, please specify your location, right, it sounded boring. It was actually boring, and it got to a point where people were like, I'm not so sure. However, if the same command or same request was more nuanced, that where would you like the food to be delivered, we saw a larger number of people actually responding back to that. Once we realized that this was something that we'd have to almost consider in every single request and response, we actually brought on freelance writers to actually script write for some of these conversational applications. So we now actually have a team of freelance writers who basically go through how you would typically otherwise write a script. They actually write down stuff that would be best for a bot to actually respond and the way for it to converse, because the emotion plays such a big part. Second was the tone, right? And this was also interesting in terms of just the way these devices function, and the sound and the way some of these things come out. So, for example, the uppercase over there, imagine Alexa literally sort of shouting at you, right? Which is, where would you want the food to be delivered? People were running away, obviously, right? They stopped being hungry at that point. But then obviously, when it was, again, a little bit more, like I said, nuanced, a little bit more friendly, hey, where would you like the food to be delivered, in that specific tone, the conversion was a lot better. Again, as we started writing some of these things down, as our script writers started working on this, they actually started putting in different tones for different messages as well. For example, in some cases, it's a lot more important to be a lot more alert-based, right? So the user should take notice. So in which case, the tone needs to be a little bit more aggressive. In that case, the tone needs to be a little bit more attentive, versus in some cases, it just needs to be friendly. This, for me, I think was very important as well, which when you have a graphical interface in front of you, it makes it a lot easier to go over. But with a voice interface, when you're just basically listening and speaking and doing something, the user actually needs direction, right? The user needs direction in terms of what do I need to do next. So this one, actually, we experimented with this a lot, right? Which was basically saying, okay, look, now select an item to add to cart. That's what you would typically do on a standard interface, right? But in the voice interface, we found that people were a little lost and they didn't even know actually how to do it. So we moved to the latter, which was to add to cart, please specify the item and quantity. For example, 1 chicken burger, right? And these example sort of commands across the entire application really helped in improving the conversion rate, because people then really got it in terms of how to go about ordering and using this interface. This is something that again, in general, as a company, we talk about a lot, which is a bot that just does one thing really well. And this cannot be more true in case of a voice application, right? By nature, the design of a voice interface is such that you cannot make it complex, because you don't have the ability to hit a back button or 4 tabs or refresh also, for that matter. Refresh is like everybody's favorite, right? But you cannot refresh on a voice application. You can maybe say start over, but then that's painful, right? So it's extremely important to make it very clear to the end user what the use case of the voice application is. There's no surprise that the most successful Alexa skill out there is actually Jeopardy, right? And the reason is because people completely get it. People know how to use it. It's a simple back and forth quiz. Anyway, so there is actually a bot. I'm not even kidding. There is actually a bot. It's a text-based bot that only generates memes. And I think it has some million-plus users who use it every day only because it's simple to use. And I am running out of time, so I'm going to quickly just run through these, which is using voice only or using voice plus text both. I'll summarize kind of on the third point, which is you want to use, Google Assistant on the Android phones is basically a voice plus text interface. The input is voice and the output is both voice and text, right? Which you actually see on the screen what the responses are coming back. That support is great for complicated menus. So whenever you have a complex use case, you want to try and give it some kind of text support as well. I think this for me was the sort of highlight point, which is, the text should be supplementing the voice, just like I hope this presentation did, which is, a lot of the stuff on the slides is supplementing kind of what I'm saying versus that really is the hero. And finally, challenges with what we've seen. There is obviously like 5,000 different challenges across the board, but the two that we think are very important to address and the ones that we try and think about every day. One is, of course, skill discovery. So great, you've made a skill and the skill is live. And our partners that we work with put in great efforts to do marketing around it. But beyond marketing, how do you organically discover that the skill actually exists? And the second is, and that's something that I'm sure everybody over here is asking each other, which is that, is this skill or the voice application we've built a good to have or a must have? I was talking to somebody earlier today in the morning, and I look at this analogy as iPhone or iPad, right? An iPhone is something which is a must have, you cannot live without, you use it like 500 times a day, versus an iPad is a good to have. You have it, you don't depend your life on it, it's more niche in that sense. So these are the things that we're sort of discovering and figuring out right now. Great, thank you. Do we have time for a question? Okay, he doesn't answer, he didn't say anything, so maybe we have a time for a question. Hey.
I have a question. One of your slides said listening is easier than reading, but I think different people have different learning styles and processing information. So I'm wondering if you're taking that into account, because some people don't listen well.
Yeah, so I think specifically when thinking about, sorry? Sorry, answering your question. When thinking about, typically when you're in a bot application, most of your responses are going to be of a certain length. They're not going to be too long, right? We always say 140 to 160 characters is the maximum length of what you want a response to be. In that case, at scale, we've seen at data that listening is easier than reading. To your point, longer sentences, let's say if they were to be like 10, 15 lines, I don't know, and you have a fair point. But at least what we've seen is whenever there's short sentences, listening is easier than reading. Great, thank you guys, I'll be around.